Imagine waking up one morning and discovering that the money you saved for years has disappeared. Your job is gone, the bank has closed, the factories are silent, and outside your home, people are standing in long lines, hoping to receive a bowl of soup. This was life for millions of Americans during the Great Depression. The story began in the late 1920s when America appeared to be rich and successful. Factories were producing cars, radios, furniture, and household appliances. New buildings were rising in big cities. Many people were investing money in the stock market. Some people even borrowed money to buy shares. They believed stock prices would continue rising forever. Let us imagine a family living in New York in 1929. The father, Henry, worked in a factory. His wife, Margaret, stayed at home with their two children. Henry was not a rich man, but he had a stable job. Every week, he brought home enough money to pay the rent, buy groceries, and occasionally take his children to see a movie. One day, a friend told Henry, "Everyone is making money in the stock market. You should invest too." Henry used some of his savings to buy shares. For a while, everything seemed perfect. The prices increased, and Henry felt that his family's future was secure. But in October 1929, the stock market crashed. Suddenly, people rushed to sell their shares. Prices fell rapidly. Within days, many investors lost their savings. Some people who had borrowed money to invest were left with heavy debts. But the stock market crash was only the beginning. As people lost money, they stopped buying unnecessary things. Factories received fewer orders. Businesses could no longer afford to pay all their workers. One by one, factories began laying off employees. One evening, Henry returned home earlier than usual. He removed his hat, sat silently at the kitchen table, and told Margaret, "The factory has closed. I do not have a job anymore." At first, the family tried to remain hopeful. Henry searched for work every day. He stood outside factory gates with hundreds of other unemployed men. He checked newspaper advertisements and walked from one business to another. But everywhere he went, he heard the same words: "There are no jobs." During the Great Depression, unemployment became a national crisis. Families who had once lived comfortably began selling their furniture, jewelry, and household items simply to buy food. Banks also started failing. Many people rushed to withdraw their savings, but some banks did not have enough cash to give everyone their money back. When a bank closed, ordinary families could lose the money they had saved for years. Life was difficult in cities, but poverty was also spreading through rural America. Farmers had already been struggling because crop prices were low. They worked long hours growing wheat, corn, and cotton. But sometimes the money they earned was not enough to repay their loans. Now imagine another family living on a farm in Oklahoma. The farmer, John, woke up before sunrise every morning. His wife made bread and his children helped with the animals. But year after year, John earned less money from his crops. He could not afford new equipment. He repaired the same old tools again and again. Then nature made the situation even worse. During the Great Depression, a severe drought hit parts of the Great Plains. The soil became dry and loose. Because of poor farming practices and a lack of rain, the wind began lifting enormous amounts of dust into the air. One afternoon, John's young daughter looked toward the horizon and saw a dark cloud approaching. It did not look like a normal storm. It looked like a giant black wall. Within minutes, the sky became dark. Dust entered the farmhouse through cracks in the doors and windows. The family covered their faces with cloth. Their crops were destroyed. Their animals struggled to breathe. These terrible dust storms became known as the Dust Bowl. Some storms were so severe that day appeared to turn into night. Thousands of farming families were forced to leave their homes. They loaded a few belongings into old cars and traveled west, hoping to find work in places such as California. Even wealthy families were affected during the Great Depression. Although their suffering was usually very different from the pain faced by poor families. Some rich people lost money in the stock market. They sold large homes, reduced household staff, stopped buying luxury goods, and began living more modestly. A family that once hosted large parties might now avoid unnecessary spending. But for poor families, the question was not whether they could afford luxuries. The question was whether they could afford dinner. During the Great Depression, people found creative ways to survive. Some men sold apples on street corners. Families planted vegetables in small gardens. Mothers repaired old clothing many times instead of buying new clothes. Some women washed empty flour sacks and turned the fabric into dresses for their daughters. Children also helped their families. Some sold newspapers, others collected coal near railway tracks or worked small jobs after school. In many cities, soup kitchens served bread and hot soup to people who could no longer afford meals. Long lines of unemployed men became a common sight. The Great Depression was not only an economic crisis, it was also an emotional crisis. People felt embarrassed, frightened, and uncertain about the future. Fathers worried because they could not support their families. Mothers tried to stretch a small amount of food for several days. Children learned to appreciate things that earlier generations had taken for granted. But the story is also about resilience. Families shared food with neighbors. People repaired old items instead of throwing them away. Communities helped one another survive. During the Great Depression, Americans learned a difficult lesson. Prosperity can disappear much faster than anyone expects. The stock market crash of 1929 did not create every problem by itself, but it became the spark that exposed deeper weaknesses in the economy. Bank failures, unemployment, rural poverty, falling crop prices, and devastating dust storms turned a financial crisis into one of the hardest periods in American history. And behind every photograph from that time, there was a family like Henry's or John's trying to survive one more day with courage, dignity, and hope.